Hello Year 11, welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to try to calculate the mean from a frequency table. So just to recap from last time, the word mean means you want to add up all the pieces of data and then divide by how many pieces of data there are. Just to have a little look at a couple of pieces of vocabulary then. So the word frequency tells us how many times a number comes up in the data, so how many times that piece of data occurs. A frequency table just lays out those pieces of data, telling us how many times they occurred, and they're ordered, so it's nice and clear to see how many there were in the data given originally. So just to have a look at the example here, this is of ages of children. This is the data before it was put in the table. And then you can see there's only 1 7 in this data, so the number of children is 1 next to the age of 7. For the age of 10, you can see there are only 2 10s, so you've got a 2 next to the age of 10, etc. So that's how a frequency table works. So like we said, we're going to try and work out the mean from a frequency table. So this is our first example for today. So the table below shows information about the number of goals scored by some football teams last week. There are 2 parts to this question. So part A, work out the total number of goals scored last week. And part B, work out the mean number of goals scored last week. So if we recap that word mean again, we know it's the total of all the pieces of data all together first, and then we divide by how many there are. So this part A is just working out the first part of your mean. We need to find the total number of goals. So in the table we've got number of goals here, and you can see it's got 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then we have number of teams. So what this table is explaining is that 5 teams scored no goals. So there were no goals within those 5 teams. The row below, we've got 8 teams that scored 1 goal each. So if you think about it, if 8 teams scored 1 goal each, then you're going to have 8 goals. The row below, you can see 2 teams scored 2 goals each. So if 2 teams scored 2 goals each, that would be 2 times 2 is 4. So what we do with these frequency tables is the first step is you want to multiply out all the rows that are given. So I'm going to write it nice and clearly by the side here. So I'm going to put part A, and I'm going to multiply out the values that they gave me in the question, row by row. So we've got 0 times 5. Remember, anything times 0 is 0. Then we have 1 times 8. That gives us 8. 2 times 2, like we said, is 4. And keep going through the whole table. So 3 times 3 is next to give us 9. And 4 times 2 is 8. So that's how many goals were scored. So to find out how many goals were scored all together, the last step for this part A is you just want to add them up. Now these questions are often calculator questions. Even though these numbers are quite easy so far, and we haven't needed a calculator, you are allowed to use a calculator to add them up. So 8, add 4, add 9, add 8 gives us 29 goals all together. So the answer to part A, the total number of goals scored last week, is 29. Part B then, work out the mean number of goals scored last week. So the main mistake that people do for this is they count the amount of rows in the table, and they think that there's only 5 pieces of data because there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Okay, this is wrong. There is not just 5 pieces of data. To find the amount of pieces of data in the question, you want to add up the amount of teams. So you want to look at the number of teams. This can sometimes be called a frequency column. So you want to find the total frequency to find out how many pieces of data there originally were. So you want to add up this number of teams column to find out how many pieces of data there were. So 5, add 8, add 2, add 3, add 2. and that gives us 20. So remember, your mean is your total divided by how many pieces of data there are. So our total number of goals was 29 from part A, and we now know there were 20 pieces of data altogether, so you want to divide that value by 20. If we type this into our calculator, it gives us our final answer. So 29 divided by 20 gives us 1.45. Okay, on to example 2 then. So it says the table below shows the marks scored on an exam question by 40 students. So if you're lucky, your question will tell you your frequency. That is the amount of data that was given. So that is the number you divide by at the end for your mean. And then it says work out the mean mark. So again, think about what we said last time. This table explains that 13 students got a mark of 0 on this question. So there were no marks gained there. 2 students got 1 mark on that question. So altogether, combining those 2 students is a total of 2 marks. So if you remember, what we did last time is we multiplied out each row one at a time. So I'm going to write it nice and clearly by the side, because this is what you'd have to do in your GCSE. So you've got 0 times 13. Remember, anything times 0 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 8 is 24. And 4 times 14 gives us 56. Remember, you can use your calculator for all of these if you need to. It's just I know some of them are quite simple and you can work them out in your head to save time. Remember, that's how many pieces of marks there are altogether. So we want to find the total of all of those numbers. So add up those 5 numbers, so the 0, 2, 6, 24 and 56. So if you type them into your calculator, it should give you 88. So now, just to work out your mean, remember your last step to find the mean, you take that 88 and you want to divide by how many pieces of data there were. So how many students there were. So we said it was in the question, but just to check, just in case it wasn't in the question, we know our answer should be 40, but it would be this column here that you'd add up if it wasn't given to you. So 13, 2, 3, 8 and 14 should come to 40. So just to find your mean, you use that 88, you divide it by the 40, type it in your calculator, and your final answer should give you 2.2. So just as a recap, your first step is to multiply out the data row by row. You want to add up all those answers to give you a total, and then you want to divide by how many pieces of data there were, and sometimes this is given in the question, sometimes you need to add up the number of students or the frequency column in the table.